All right, today's goal is to subtract integers, opposite or inverse operation, what we learned in the last lesson. Have this down with today's date and page number. All right, your warm-up, 8 problems. Give it your best shot using information we learned about in the last couple lessons. Good luck. And I hope you have the same answers that I did up there. Remember, you can always reorganize the addition problems to create subtraction problems, or look for ways that you see like, or if you see like signs, like number 2 is 5 and 12 are both adding. And then opposites are just, if it's a positive, it's a negative of that number. If it's a negative, it's a positive. All right, let's get into today's stuff. Now, that whole idea of opposites is going to be important today. You don't have to write this down. You should have this from a previous lesson in the notes already. But on a number line, integer subtraction is the opposite of integer addition. Integer subtraction is going to undo the addition. It's like inverse operation, which we learned in previous lessons. So, just another reminder, put this in your notes. When you move left on a number line to subtract a positive integer, and you move right on a number line to subtract a negative integer. Again, left on a number line to subtract a positive, right on a number line to subtract a negative. Less goes to the left, greater goes to the right. All right, so the other way you can also think of this, and you can write this in your notes if you want, when you're subtracting, it's like you're adding the opposite of the second number in your problem. There's 2 numbers you got to subtract. We'll talk about how it's really adding the opposite of the second. We'll get into that right now. All right, here's a problem for you to look at. So with A, we're looking at -3, and the second number is -4. So both numbers are going negative. So the trick we wrote down is think of the second number as adding its opposite. So really, we see -3 minus 4 equals -7. But if we think about adding the opposite with this problem, we can think of it more as -3 plus the opposite of 4 is -4. So when we do that, you're really just adding 2 negatives, so you have the same sign, so you know that that's -7. Now, for B, you're going to see problems like this where it's going to make it a lot easier if we think about adding the opposite. So here we're starting with -5, and then we're subtracting -9. Now, to do that, you have to think about the second number being the opposite. So we have to add the opposite. So what's the opposite of -9? The opposite of -9 is +9. So knowing your opposites help. So instead of subtracting by the negative, you're literally adding the 2 numbers. Now we're dealing with an addition problem, which is what we worked on in the last lesson. And when you look at it, you know that you can see that 9, being the positive number, is larger than the negative number of -5. So you could rewrite this as 9 minus 5, and that gives you 4, which is exactly what the answer is for this. So if you think about the second number being switched to its opposite, you can work through these. You might want to have these 2 examples down before moving on. All right, let's look at 2 more. So for A in this one, we have -5 subtracting 2. So again, think of this second number as its opposite. So what is the opposite of -2? That would be +2. And we're going to add. So really it's -5 plus 2. I'm sorry, -5 plus 2. Negative, since it's the opposite. Okay? So it's the opposite. So when you're dealing with that, you're really looking at adding the 2 together that are both negative. You should get -7. For B, we have -3 minus -5. So what's the opposite of -5? That would be +5. So we change this to a +5, and we change this to a positive. So really, whenever you see two negative symbols next to each other, imagine that is just turning it to a positive. So it's really negative 3 plus 5. So you can always rewrite this then as 5 minus 3, and that gives you 2. So that's another way that you can get 2 here in this example. You don't have to write this down unless you want to. All right, your turn to try these on your own. Let's see if you can find the right answer for these 4. Come back when you're done. And here are the answers you should have had for all 4. Now the first one is pretty easy. You add 3, you subtract 1, you get 2. For number 2, though, we have 2 negatives. Remember, the 2 negative symbols make a positive, so it's really 4 plus 2, which gives you 6. For number 3, it's negative 1 minus 5. But if you think of the opposite of minus as adding, it's actually negative 6 because you're adding 2 same signs. And then for number 4, we see that minus negative again. So the easiest way to take care of that is turn it into a positive. Should have got 5. So let's take a look in here in example 2 at subtracting integers. Some more work with it. So we have 4 minus 6 is our problem. Now, when you're looking at this, you're probably realizing, well, if I have 4 of something and I take 6 away, I'm going to have a negative number. That's correct. So you can think again as this one as adding the opposite. So we could change the minus to an addition, but what's the opposite of 6? That'd be negative 6. So now when you look at that, it may help you to think of negative 6 plus 4, or you can replace it as 4 minus 6, which brings us back to where we're at, and that gives you negative 2. So be aware whenever, if the first number, let's rewrite this as the first number is smaller, value will be negative. So here's an example of how you see that. Okay. You can write this down if you want. We're going to move on to the next one so we can test this again. All right, so again, using our rules, whenever you see minus of a number, think of the integer as adding its opposite. We have 2 negative symbols here. That creates a positive. So think of it as 3 plus 3, and 3 plus 3 gives you 6. So the correct answer for this one should be 6, because you should see the 2 negatives and think positive, or creating an adding problem. Here's another one where we have 2 negative symbols next to each other, minus and negative. And again, if you have the 2 negative symbols next to each other, just take those 2 negatives and create a positive. And what's 2 plus 5? You should get 7. So try to catch on to whenever you see 2 negative symbols, change it to adding. And again, if you have 3 minus 6 here, the second number is larger than the first, so you should know that it's going to be a negative number. So if you go up the number line 3 but go back 6, you're going to end up with a value of negative 3 for your answer. Okay, and why? Because this second number is larger. You know that your answer is going to be a negative value. Okay, now it's your turn to try some problems on your own. Let me get rid of this. Go ahead and try these 4 and come back when you're done. We'll see if you got it down. And here are the answers you should have gotten for these 4. First one was pretty easy. The second one, I changed the subtraction to an adding and creating a negative. See negative 3. Change the 2 negative symbols to 3 to adding. Same with 4, except we had negative 12 plus 4. Negative 12 has a larger absolute value than 4 does. All right, let's get into example 3. Here we're going to be looking at expressions. And we've been dealing with these before. These are our plug and chug problems. So we have a minus 4, where a is going to equal 2. So all you have to do is plug and chug. So we replace a with 2, and now we're going to deal with 2 minus 4. Again, since the first number is smaller than the bigger number, the second number is larger, so we know we're going to have a negative answer of negative 2. You can put this one in your notes if you want. Here's another one, b minus 6, where b equals 8. Again, rewrite the problem as b minus 6. Change out the b for 8, and now you have 8 minus 6. And since the first number is larger than the second number, you know it looks very normal to what you're normally used to with subtraction. You're going to have a positive value because the second number is smaller than the first. Oops, I went too far. You have some problems I want you to do on your own. So go ahead and plug in each one of those for n. And again, you should notice that n is minus negative, so if we replace those two negative symbols, it's really the same as saying n plus 6. That may help you to solve the rest of them. Good luck. And hopefully you got the same answers I did, 2, 8, negative 9, and 13. So I just plug and chugged, and that's what I got. Here we go. Now we're on track. Here's your box of thought. Go ahead and give some good thought to these. Give me some full answers to be able to tell me how you did. And here's your quiz. You got 5 problems to do. Take your time, do them right, and then we'll see if you got them. And that ends today's lesson. So next time we're going to probably look at multiplication since we've just done adding and subtracting with integers. See you next time.